everyone, and welcome to the quarterfinals of the New Jersey Invitational, the conclusion of Season 2 of the SCG Tour. Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan here in the booth, bringing you the quarterfinals, brought to you by the wonderful people over at Ultimate Guard. As we are underway, you're going to watch Brad Nelson with Death Shadow Aggro on the left, Miles Rodriguez playing Burn on the right. Nelson is on the play, given that he is the number 3 overall seed. He is going to play Mirish's Bauble. We're going to take a look at the top card of Miles Rodriguez's deck. He also started things off with a Blood Crypt off of a Bloodstained Mire. Now here's an attack for 2. Rodriguez is going to fall down to 18. Nelson at 17. And one thing about this matchup, Patrick, we don't expect it to take very long.
No. Well, I will say in terms of number of turns, should not take very long. But this matchup is chock full of decisions. So I'd expect both players' turns to take a long time because there's a lot of decisions to be made. But in terms of games, be shocked if we were going past turn 5.
Rodriguez will now take his turn as Nelson is off to a pretty quick start now. With Death Shadow Aggro, it's about dealing yourself damage, but we can't forget Burn also deals itself a pretty healthy amount of damage with its Fetch Lance and Shock Lance from Ravnica.
And fundamentally, Miles has to determine on the first turn, am I going to try to be a control deck or a beatdown deck and try to race? I think he's generally better positioned trying to be more of a control deck in this matchup, but depending on what his hand allows, he may just have to get into a damage race.
Rodriguez does search up a basic mountain off of his Arid Mesa.
And a raw damage race is the type of game that I think Brad can actually win.
Yeah.
I think Miles is likely to die with spells in his hand in the games where Brad has his best draw.
Swiftspear is going to come across here for Rodriguez, 16-17 right now in favor of Miles as we head back Nelson's way. The 2014 Players Champion looking to head back to the Players Championship this year. It's going to be an interesting matchup here. The life total that matters the most, I think, is Nelson's, but obviously Nelson is trying to bring Rodriguez down to 0 as well. I think we're going to see a lot of turns like this, which is going to be Brad thinking a lot about how he's got to play his turns.
Like I said, number of turns shouldn't be a lot, but number of decisions and how hard those decisions are, it is dense.
Nelson, for example, has a copy of Mutagenic Growth in his hand right now, which can play a role for a multitude of reasons. Can be very good, but also deals himself 2 points of damage to play. This is a Thoughtseize.
Sure.
Get a little look. Pay a little life to do so. You're going to find a Sacred Foundry or Wooded Foothills, a Stomping Ground, a Rift Bolt, Boros Charm, Boros Charm. What do you think?
Pretty soft hand. I would imagine here that it will be the Boros Charm. Just does the most damage, and Miles has, there's not really mana concerns going on with this sort of hand. This is the type of hand, though, that Brad can beat.
It is.
Very light on interaction. So if Nelson is able to follow up with Death Shadow, Miles is already in a bunch of trouble.
Nelson is going to take that Boros Charm. Going to write down the contents of Miles' hand, Brad, and now he will move forward with the rest of his turn. Swiftspear is going to come across here for 2, it looks like. Rodriguez is going to fall down to 15. Nelson going to sacrifice a Bloodstained Mire. Remember, Brad has no basics.
Yep.
So it's kind of forced to take the full amount here. There's an Overgrown Tomb. Is it time to go towards Death Shadow if he has one? Well, that answers that. MVP in the matchup.
Yep.
Brad's best card without question.
And game 1, or the pre-board games at least, game 1 and 2, not a card that Miles handles very easily.
The draw for the turn here for Miles is Lava Spike. Now, if you're Miles Rodriguez, how do you navigate this? Your opponent's already at 11. It's the second turn of the game, which is obviously a favorable spot for Burn, but every damage you deal to Nelson, the Death Shadow grows.
Pretty sure he's got to just hang back on D here. I think my line of play, because you can't get any prowess triggers here via your spells because that just grows the Death Shadow, I'm probably just Lava Spiking, suspending the Rift Bolt, passing, hoping to block out of the turn, and hoping to peel out.
Okay.
Now, this is what I was talking about earlier. Turn 3 is Nelson's turn in the matchup. That's where he has an edge. And there is nothing that Miles can do right now if Nelson has his best cards.
Well, we know one card that Nelson does have is Mutagenic Growth. That much is for sure. The rest, unknown at this point. But you can see Miles Rodriguez's hand. And much like Brad, his turn's going to be difficult as well. It's not so many turns we're going to play. It's just the complexity of the turns that we're going to see here.
I think he has to suspend the Rift Bolt this turn because he may not get another turn after this.
He will suspend the Rift Bolt, but will he fire off the Lava Spike?
He has to spend his mana because at that point, Boros Charm paired with any 1-mana spell gets him a kill. He can't sit back on this Lava Spike.
Well, he has sat back on this Lava Spike.
My issue with sitting back on the Lava Spike is you Rift Bolt Brad down to 8, and you only have 7 points in your hand.
Sure, so you just can't finish.
You can't finish the game next turn.
Unless, of course, Brad sacrifices a fetch land, or Gataxian Probe, or Street Wraith, or something like that.
Yes. But in those scenarios, the previous line of just casting the Lava Spike is still fine.
Sure.
And in fact, it may constrain some of the sequences that Brad would like to do to try to find the missing piece of the puzzle to get a kill this turn.
Well, Nelson going to shuffle that hand back and forth. He knows he might just be dead on the next turn.
Talked a little bit about this on the pregame show of when Rodriguez's hands are dense with sorceries, trying to thread the needle of how you time all this stuff is very complicated. But I think he needed to sort of take the risk this turn. I think the goal that Rodriguez has here is the Death Shadow doesn't matter very much this turn, and I may be able to finish off Brad if he does anything to reduce his life total. But you may end up giving Brad just another full turn. And
which you don't want to do.
That to me is too risky.
Nelson is in the tank now. It's funny, this game might go 4 turns total, maybe 5. And each turn is going to take a little while because these are very difficult decisions. You get something wrong, you lose.
Yes.
On either side.
And also, Nelson has to sit here and think about what's the range of Rodriguez's hand right now. What could it be? He knows about the Boros Charm.
He doesn't know about the Lava Spike, though.
Not a long game in terms of number of turns, but complexity of decisions and how much those decisions matter.
This is a Swift Spear. Here come the Knuckleheads. There is certainly some blocking to be done here. Seems like it's almost too risky not to block. There's a problem card for Miles Rodriguez's Death Shadow. Currently just a 2/2, but has the ability to grow a lot, real fast.
So this sequence is potentially representing free spell of some sort plus Become Immense, which I believe will kill Rodriguez if he says no blocks.
What do we have here? A Wild Mikado post-combat. Pass the turn back. Rodriguez is going to sacrifice this one in Foothills. But no Lightning Bolt to play. So it looks like he just has a blocker here. This is a 10. And Nelson being at 11 is pretty important right now. There's not a combination, right? He's going to go down to 8 from Rift Bolt. And then there's no combination of cards that Miles can draw to deal 8 this turn?
Searing Blaze. Searing Blaze on the Nikadal and the Lava Spike.
3, 4, 5, 6. That's Xaxes.
Yeah.
Yep. Actually, I think it was one more than Xaxes. But
yeah,
yes.
I think I imagine Searing Blaze gets it done here. Or even Rift Bolt on the Nikadal, and then you have 2 coming across. 3, 4 from the spells in your hand is. No, I think he's rolled up, right?
So he should Rift Bolt the Nikadal.
Yeah, he's rolled up. He can if he Rift Bolts the Nikadal, assuming that goes through, there's no mutagenic growth. Swift Spear goes to 2. 2 more spells in hand is 4. The spells deal 7. 4 plus 7 is 11.
Okay. Where's the Rift Bolt going to go, though? Let's find that out. I'm not even sure if Miles knows now.
I mean, if you're on the plan of wait, try to kill you in one sort of burst, it makes the most sense to go after the Nikadal here. Because you're not dealing 3 to Brad. You can still hang back and try to build up a hand that can kill it. You've got 7 points, only need to come up with 4 more.
It's going after the Nikadal. Will Nelson have a response?
I think he needs to. Well, I think it's the mutagenic growth.
So now Brad's got to do the math because Brad can say, okay, Rift Bolt, Prowess Trigger, creature's a 2/2, or 2-power creature, 2/3. Boros Charm, that's additional 5.
Yep.
4 from the Boros Charm, 1 from the Prowess, that's 8, and then any 3 damage spell.
And keep in mind that it's hard to to feel like Rodriguez would have definitely lava spiked last turn. So Brad may not be playing around a 1-mana spell in hand right now.
Mm-hmm. But he could play around a 1-mana spell that he could draw.
Yeah, that's true.
Because there are so many. But he's going to let the Wild Nikado die.
And assuming that the prowess trigger, all this gets announced, I think we have exactly 11 coming across here.
Stomping Ground's going to enter the battlefield untapped. This is a Lava Spike. That's a Boros Charm. He'll play those spells very quickly.
Yeah, that's Xaxes.
That is exactly 11.
Yeah, I mean, very important that everything gets announced here. And then he has to attack.
That is it. Miles Rodriguez is going to win game number 1 here over Brad Nelson. Burn is up a game over Death's Shadow aggro.
And, you know, that's a heartbreaker there for Brad, because the exact nature of Rodriguez's hand, with 7 points of burn that can only target a player, not a creature, pretty brutal.
What's interesting about that, as these players shuffle up here for game number 2, was holding the Lava Spike what made the difference there.
Yeah, I mean, my instinct there was, you know, you've got to give yourself a shot to win the game the next turn. I think Rodriguez gave up a lot of equity in terms of doing that, but just the way everything broke was perfect.
Let's talk about the StarCityGames.com weekly sale very quickly here. It does end on Monday at 10:59 a.m. East Coast time, but don't worry, we got another one coming for you very soon.
So every week at StarCityGames.com, there's a weekly sale. Starts 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern time on Monday, runs through the week, and resets with a new sale the following Monday. Right now, 10% off all non-English singles. You can see some of them up on the screen there. So head over to the website before the sale ends Monday, 10:59 a.m., and make sure to check back once a week to see what the new sale is.
Game number 2 about to be underway here between Brad Nelson and Miles Rodriguez. Nelson will be on the play here just like he was the last game. But remember, with how things are now set up in our elimination rounds, the first 2 games are pre-sideboarded. The final 3 will have the sideboard. So we'll go over the sideboards after this game. But for right now, we're going to go over Brad Nelson, learn a little bit more about him. And we all know how accomplished he is, especially in Standard. Not to say he's a slouch in any constructed format, but Constructed and Standard is the name of the game for him. He played Bant Humans over there. He's playing Death's Shadow aggro over here. Is a 30-year-old who currently resides in Roanoke, Virginia. 8 open top 8s with 1 win, 2 invitational top 8s with a win in Indianapolis a couple of years ago. Great golfer, big StarCraft 2 fan. Won the 2014 inaugural StarCityGames.com Players Championship. He'd like to go back again this year. And remember, last year, a semifinals appearance.
Yes.
So he's done very well in that tournament, but really, if you think about Brad Nelson, tournaments like that are perfect for him. He knows who the competitors are. He has a good idea of what they're going to play, and he's able to metagame appropriately.
Brad Nelson in a multi-format constructed tournament where the metagame is tight and largely known. I don't know if I don't know if I would bet on him against anyone. Bet against him against anyone else. That's so exciting about the World Championships.
Yes, it is.
It's just right in Brad's wheelhouse.
Yes, it is. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch coming from PAX West 2 weeks from now. Brad Nelson will be among some of the best players in the world. Right now, we're going to watch him play against Miles Rodriguez, who is currently up a game here. And like we said in the pregame show, we felt this one was going to be difficult for Nelson as he very quickly takes the mulligan.
And very important for him to get this game right now.
He's got to get one.
When we go to sideboard and Rodriguez gets access to Path to Exile and Deflecting Palm, I think asking Brad to win multiple games on the draw is too much.
I do too. No, I did have the opportunity, to talk to Brad before we actually went live. And confidence, as we said, not something he lacks. He felt like he could certainly win this match. He got up early to test on Magic Online with some friends, and he felt, I can definitely win. I wouldn't say that I'm favored, but I like the spot that I'm in to be able to win. And we're going to see how things actually do shake out here. I think it's going to be a lot for him to overcome.
Yeah, and that's a really painful game to lose there.
Yeah.
You got your best card in the matchup. You're on the play. Pretty good start there. And then once all the information is revealed, the mutagenic growth would have saved him, and instead was in his hand when he died.
How does he like the 6? That's the question. Looks like he's going to keep it. He'll scry. Remember, Rodriguez kept 7.
And Rodriguez with a great looking hand there. 2 lands. Well, I guess we'll see it.
Yeah.
So hold up.
Probe will make it easy. Swift Spear, Lightning Bolt, Atarka's Command, Boros Charm. Oh boy, Rift Bolt, 2 Scalding Tarns. Patrick is he's fanning himself down right now.
Right, that's a great looking hand, and also it's a hand that is well suited to play either the beatdown game or the control game based on how Brad opens up.
Yeah. Nelson will draw. Already down to 18. Remember, the fetch lands can only find Ravnica shock lands, which means we're probably going to see him go down to 15 in a minute. No basics here. But he's also got to contend with a Lightning Bolt over there, so perhaps he doesn't want to play a card like Wild Nikotl just yet.
Yeah, what's the incentive here to just cast something on turn 1 when you could just play a fetch land and get a tapped dual land?
Well,
these are all very tough questions.
Oh, very difficult. As far as aggressive decks go, I think of the aggressive Zoo deck that Wrath Levy played a few years ago that he won back-to-back Grand Prix with, and how you had to make sure you got the fetch lands right, so your Tribal Flames and Gaia's Mites and all that stuff actually worked appropriately. This is this same level of complexity, probably more, because you have to know exactly how much damage you want to deal yourself.
Exactly. It's more of a math puzzle with all the same complexity about what lands you're trying to fetch.
Yeah. So right now, Nelson says, okay, I'm going to play a Wild Nikotl into your Lightning Bolt. Maybe this prevents you from playing a Swift Spear this turn. Who knows?
Or Rodriguez might think, all right, well, what if he has mutagenic growth? Am I supposed to take a different line?
Exactly.
There is an argument here to just go suspend Rift Bolt. That is not a bad line here.
Maybe for the lack of a better term, the safest line?
It's the safest line, and it doesn't matter if Nelson's able to grow the Nikotl to a 3/3 the next turn. To me, the most important thing is Rodriguez should get the sorceries out of his hand as soon as he possibly can. The more that he can play this game at instant speed, the harder it is for Nelson to shove on a Death Shadow, keep his life total low, but not kill himself. So if you have a window where it's fine to stick a sorcery, I think Rodriguez should err on the side of taking it. So I know suspending Rift Bolt on a baseline probably looks like the weirdest play against just casting the Swift Spear and saying go, or casting the Lightning Bolt. I think he can justify it here.
Well, Rodriguez has searched up a Stomping Ground, which he's going to need that anyway, because he's got 2 copies of Atarka's Command now.
Imagine that Nelson mutagenic growths the Nikotl next turn. You can still go, if you suspend the Rift Bolt, you can still go, okay, Swift Spear, Lightning Bolt to finish off your Nikotl, everything's fine. If you Lightning Bolt here and there's a mutagenic growth, it's really bad news.
It's horrible news.
Yep. I like this play a lot from Rodriguez. It's not the most intuitive one, but it's the line that I would take.
To Nelson we go. Gataxian Probe the draw.
Sweet. more of that stuff.
Yep. He saw a little bit of body language there. I didn't want to find that. The problem with this is whenever he draws a card like Probe or Street Wraith in game 1, you can't not.
Right.
You can't not do that.
He doesn't even have blue mana to fetch for.
Yeah.
So he just has to.
The whole deck is based on abusing your own life total and getting deep in your deck to find Battle Rage and become immense.
And Nelson's sitting here thinking, he's already got 13 in his hand. Like, what am I supposed to do from here?
All right, Bloodstained Mire. Godless Shrine, perhaps? Yep. 12.
It's a tough way to do it.
It's a burn player's dream.
Yeah.
But at times, their nightmare.
Right. Death Shadow makes it bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
$10. The card drawn for Miles, he'll show just a moment. It's the second copies of Atarka's Command.
Oddly enough, that's a bad draw here because the game is very likely to end with Rodriguez having multiple 2-mana spells in his hand, one way or the other. Either Brad kills him or kills himself.
Yep. Draw a card from the Probe. Remember, Nikotl right now, 3/3.
Yep.
Got white and red mana.
Only had to pay half his life total to get to that point.
Sure did. but he got there.
He has made a 3/3 for 1 mana. It's a good deal.
In comes the Nikotl. Rodriguez down to 14. Death Shadow.
Okay.
Pass the turn back. All right, Riftbolt, where are you going? Reminds me a lot of last game. This is a difficult decision.
Yep.
I'm sitting here, and I'm just enticed to just say, all right, let's just go upstairs. But if I bring you down to 7, the Death Shadow's bigger.
Right, the most straightforward line here is knock Brad down to 7, play your Swift Spear and say go, hopefully block out a turn, bolt Nelson end of turn down to 4, untap Boros Charm.
Yep. That's the easiest one.
That's the easiest line. The alternative line, I think, is Rift Bolt. I guess you could just Rift Bolt the Death Shadow.
I don't know how far that gets you. Okay. Muted, ooh, high straight. Cycle Street Wraith.
Still got a bolt in hand.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to pick this fight, we can. There's 3 damage on that. Death Shadow right now, 5/5.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, we've come this far. We got to keep going.
Miles is going to sacrifice Scalding Tarn. Does he have to search up Sacred Foundry right now? I guess he feels like the answer is no.
He drew a Wooded Foothills.
Okay, that changes it.
Yep. Although, yeah, I guess he can protect his life till a little bit here. It's odd because it definitely signifies to Nelson that his draw step was a land because he has the Boros Charms in hand, but...
And I think Brad's smart enough to pick up on that.
Right, but whatever. I think keeping your life total a little bit higher here, it's possible the game materializes in such a way that Rodriguez can win the game with the Atarkas commands instead, so he might as well save himself the 2 points.
Swift Spear is pretty easy. Nelson knows about the bolt.
Yeah, we got to keep going. We came this far.
All right, we're going over there. Huh. Pay 2 life, mutagenic growth. So that's actually +4/+4.
Right.
So now there's 6 damage on a 7/7?
That sounds right. And I mean, the big problem here now from Rodriguez's side, though, is he doesn't have lethal next turn. Brad's at 6, and he can't cast multiple spells. That's why I mentioned before the Atarkas command is actually a bad draw. It's unlikely he's going to be able to cast all of his 2s this game anyway.
Okay.
So.
All right, follow-up question. Did he attack?
No.
That's just out the window, right?
Right. Brad says, okay, I go to 4, and then.
Most likely kill you?
I mean, he needs to deal 1 damage to himself or come up with 1 point.
Okay.
So he's got to just hang back here.
Getcha. And he has to block now.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, there's...
Teamer Battle Rage. He has Ferocious. Now the question is just now, is Brad going to sack the fetch land or not? Target creature is going to get double strike. It also gets trample. So 13 minus 6, we're looking at a 7/7. 7 minus 2 is 5. 5 plus 7 is 12.
He doesn't need to make a
15.
move.
He doesn't do anything,
yeah,
right? That's just lethal right now.
This is Nelson's turn in the matchup.
You said it was all about turn 3.
Turn 3.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's going to do it. So Brad Nelson's going to win game number 2 here over Miles Rodriguez. Death, Shadow, Aggro, and Burn. Getting ready to go to the sideboards, and so are we. And Miles, we're going to start with you. Now, some of these cards, Destructive Revelry, 4 of those, Searing Blood, Skull Cracks, not so much. So let's talk about Deflecting Palm, Lightning Helix, Path to Exile, what you think of each.
I don't even know if I'm that interested in Lightning Helix in the matchup, just because if Nelson's winning, it's not this nickel and dime game. It's overwhelming him in one shot. It still may be an upgrade over Atarkas Command and Boros Charm, which don't do a whole lot in the matchup. And then you have, of course, the Path to Exiles and the Deflecting Palms, which are at their best here.
Other side of things here for Nelson. A Forest, an Isle Spellbomb, a Grafdigger's Cage, 2 Path to Exile, Dismember Ranger of Vios, Tarmogoyf, 2 Hooting Mandrills, 2 Inquisition of Kozilek, a Stony Silence, an Ancient Grudge, a Pyroclasm. What the heck's going on here?
Probably going to see the copies of Path to Exile, the Inquisitions, and the Tarmogoyf. I'm not sure if he wants to bring in Hooting Mandrills because I think Become Immense is better in this matchup than the Mandrills are, even though you can talk yourself into a 4/4, it's outside of bolt range. I think Brad's better served using his Graveyard as a combo engine rather than trying to play a conventional beatdown game.
Well, there is some complex sideboarding to be done here for both players. We'll give them a moment to do that. Let's talk about the Season 3 schedule here on the SCG Tour. We're here in New Jersey this weekend. New Jersey is actually the weekend that kind of closes Season 2 and also kicks off Season 3 because we have a Modern Open that is taking place behind us. We had about 760 players for. A little bit of a break. We go to Richmond for Standard, and then sunny Orlando.
Yeah, for some Modern in the middle of September. Then we kick off October with a Standard Open in Indianapolis. October 15th will be the regional championships. You can head over to go.starcitygames.com/regional. We just posted the venues this weekend, so you can check out the regional championships closest to you. Then a Modern Open in Milwaukee. After that, we head to Baltimore for Legacy, then Modern in Columbus, Standard in Knoxville, and then we close out Season 3 with the Atlanta Invitational, December 2nd through the 4th, Standard and Modern again as the Invitational formats.
Let's talk about playmats, folks, and what you're going to get for signing up for those Classics and Opens. Now, you play in a Standard one, you're going to get the very awesome Dark Salvation. I knew I was going to mess that up once this weekend. Dark Salvation playmat. If you play a little Modern action, you're going to get Steel Overseer. We're going to see that card a little bit later in the hands of Eric Hawkins. And then last but certainly not least, it is the old Sensei's Divining Top with a brand new artwork. Again, you sign up for any Classic or Open, and during Season 3 for Standard, for Modern, for Legacy, you will get the free and exclusive playmats that are associated with those formats. So, back to game number 3 of this match. We are about to go. Both these players are sideboarded. They are shuffling up, and we do want to update you guys on what's going on in that other match between Jadine Klumperens, and let me make sure I don't get the names wrong here, Lucas Loyson. We got 2 LLs in the top end. We've got Lucas Loyson and then Liam Lonergan.
How dense of a game in terms of decisions was that for 5 turns of Magic?
Unbelievable.
Yeah, my line that I would have taken on Rodriguez's last turn would have been Riftbolt Nelson, play Swift Spear, say go, hope to get out alive, and then you finish off the game that way. I don't think there's any way for him to beat the best possible sequences Brad has in that spot, but I think it's his best shot of winning the game for sure the next turn, which is critical in that spot.
For our backup match between JD and Lucas, tied 1-1, Jun Jeskai control. I have a feeling have some time to jump over there, but maybe not.
Yep. That said, once Rodriguez makes the move to try to kill the Death Shadow with the Riftbolt, I'm fine following up. Like, once you've gone that far, you have to try to get it off the table.
I don't think you can go halfway.
Exactly, and also if Brad's protecting it, it involves his life total, so it's sort of a wash of whether or not you're burning him or trying to get the Death Shadow off the table. And if you do get the Death Shadow off the table, it's trivial to win the game.
Yeah, it's good shape if that's off the battlefield.
Right.
So, but what you can tell there, and we talked about it quite a bit during the pregame show and right now, Death Shadow is the card.
Yes.
It's the card in the matchup.
Though Rodriguez now much better suited to fight it post-board with his copies of Deflecting Palm and Path to Exile.
Yes.
In his seat, I would cut the 2-mana burn spells. I would get rid of the Boros Charms and the Atarkus commands. I'm fine with the 2-mana spells that can interact with creatures, because Brad, has creatures. You want to kill them, totally fine. And I think Rodriguez is better served trying to be the control deck as much as possible in this matchup. But the 2-mana burn spells that don't impact the battlefield, I would want to cut those.
You see Miles going to go back to the drawing board really quickly. Now, there's a reason for that. This guy wants to win this tournament, as does Brad Nelson and everybody else in our top 8, because they're playing for a lot here this weekend. First place is $10,000, 50 SCG points, an invite to one of our next invitationals. There's more involved with that, but we'll get there in just a moment. At the very least, our quarterfinalists will walk out over $1,500, 30 SCG points, an invite to our next invitational here in Atlanta. Top 4 finalists, so on and so forth. A lot of money on the line, but for the winner, it's that invite to the Players' Championship, the invite to Pro Tour Kaladesh in Honolulu. Buys and free entry to our Opens, free entry to our Classics, and they're going to get their likeness on a token. And really, it's been kind of fun talking to people about what they want in their token, because they don't even know. Monarch has been kind of the thing that people have been thinking about, given the conspiracy product, but so many players are focused on, I want to win this tournament and go to the Pro Tour and the Players' Championship.
I would choose a Boros Soldier and just wait. Bide my time.
Wait for the comeback?
Ravnica will be back here, 4 or 5 years, and it'll look really forward thinking that that's the token I selected.
Okay.
Maybe Assemble the Legion appears in some Jeskai control sideboard at some point.
Maybe some dual deck.
Yeah. I would still be a Boros Soldier.
I would still be on my my Master of Waves thing.
Yeah.
I still want to be liquefied.
Right. Shows up a little bit in Modern, too.
Yeah, a little love in Merfolk.
A little bit.
Yep.
A little bit.
I'd like to see how that would look, as these players are going to take a look at their opening hands. Rodriguez is going to send it back. Nelson, he's thinking on it. It looks like Brad is going to keep, while Miles is going to take a mulligan, though he's taking a long look. We'll let you know how he decides in just a moment here. But let's talk about a token that we do know was done. That's Max McVitie. That's our Columbus Invitational champion during Season 1 of the SCG Tour. We're going to see him at the Players' Championship. However, not a lot of time to go about getting this thing, because, well, whoever wins this tournament they're going to have a token very soon.
Yes, exactly. You can get it a couple different ways. All open participants and all classic participants get this token, but again, once this is over, we're going to have that new token coming out of the pipeline soon. So, if you can't make it out to an event, place an order from StarCityGames.com, $5 or greater, and a token will be sent to you.
Max, a player who made a name for himself on the SCG Tour, very excited to see how he's going to perform at the Invitational. One of the unknowns.
Yes.
At the at the Players Championship later this year. But his Invitational win, thanks to some humans, was very dominant and fun to watch. I don't know if I could handle playing this Death Shadow deck.
It seems stressful.
It's like walking a tightrope.
Particularly this matchup.
Well, I can say this with confidence. I get a little frustrated when I make a mistake with myself. Where Death Shadow aggro, it feels like you are in control of what's going to happen.
Yep.
You know, Brad was really frustrated with how he lost to Eric Hawkins. He's just like, I just screwed up.
Yep.
You know, in the match that we covered. In game 1, he's like, I'm supposed to take all the damage, go down to 1, and then kill him. I'm like, yeah, I would have missed that. So totally understandable. And, I mean, the power level of this deck is off the charts. It's just a weird deck to play. It really is. But Brad Nelson, Sam Black, Justin Cohen, those gentlemen and many others have really felt strongly about this deck.
The decks that intrigue me, I've said this several times throughout the broadcast, the decks that intrigue me the most in Modern are the decks that get to do a lot of busted stuff for 0 mana. So this deck, Affinity, Infect to a lesser degree, those are the decks that feel like they are cheating. I would want to be playing these.
Swiftspear going to come in here for Rodriguez. Nelson down to 19, Miles down to 18, thanks to the Ravnica Shockland, as we are underway here in game number 3. Sometimes turn 1 takes a little while.
Yep.
Not too straightforward for this deck. Looks like Nelson has at least 1 land, Swiftspear, all that jazz. He did keep his 7, so he's got 8 cards in hand now after his draw step.
Yeah, there's the Gitaxian Probe, and what's that worth with the Swiftspear versus how much does knowing Rodriguez's hand inform my decision making versus do I want to save this for a turn where I'm trying to burst him down with Death Shadow versus et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's just on the Gitaxian Probe that's in his hand. We're not talking about the other 7 cards.
Yeah, like the step links.
Right.
Which is typically where you want to start. It gets worse the longer the game goes because you don't want to draw lands anyway.
Yeah. This matchup can best be described as 5 really tough turns.
Probe is where Nelson's going to start. He's going to fall down to 17. Rodriguez is going to show his hand of Lightning Bolt, Rift Bolt, and just a couple of lands. How do we feel about this hand?
A fine 6-card hand, obviously a little land heavy. The scry here, very helpful for Rodriguez, almost certainly kept a spell on top. And if there was, if he had no information about what was going on, he could have sacked a fetch land instead. So Nelson knows that there's a good card on top of Rodriguez's deck right now.
Like getting the opportunity to see the hand is pretty important for Nelson because he's got to worry about cards like Path to Exile and Deflecting Palm after sideboard, especially Deflecting Palm.
Right, but how long are you willing to wait on the Gitaxian Probe? Because there's going to be a couple draw steps here where Rodriguez could get a Path or a Deflecting Palm that you don't know about, which is really bad news. Plus, you have a Swiftspear, and that has prowess. So, yeah, that's just... I know for a deck with a bunch of 1-mana creatures and bolts, this would feel like it would be simple. It is anything but.
Yeah, that's for sure. Bloodstained Mire. Yeah, also if you goof with searching lands, it's a disaster.
Oh yeah, we haven't even talked about the fetch land configuration and what lands those allow them to get, because not all the fetches get all the duels.
Yep. All right, Blood Crypt, here you are. Nelson down to 14. It's... It might be Monastery Swiftspear.
Could be an Inquisition.
He has a Death Shadow in hand, but he's not low enough. All right, Inquisition of Kozilek. Which bolt do you want? The Lightning variety or the Rift variety? Gonna go with the Lightning variety. Pass a turn back. Draw a card. Path to Exile. In for 1.
Great draw step there for Rodriguez.
Not bad at all. Suspend Rift Bolt, kick it back. Nelson will untap and draw.
Especially this matchup, there is no cost. It is just one mana terminate.
Yeah. Having access to each other's deck list helping for both players. And knowing that Path to Exile is just a clean removal spell here. Swift Spear. In for 1. Any follow-up here for Nelson. Rodriguez paused a little bit about taking that.
Yeah, if I was in Rodriguez's spot, you know what the top card of your deck is going to be, and Nelson has an idea of what it could be. I think it's really important to already have your mind made up of how you're going to respond to his plays next turn. If you know you're not going to path a Swift Spear or a Step Links, let's say, you just have to say, okay, it resolves.
Yep.
Because that pause there gives Nelson a lot of information about what the card you just drew was.
We'll be heading back Rodriguez's way in just a moment. Riftbolt's going to come off suspend so long as he does remember the trigger.
It's a really,
which he does.
It's a really important thing when when your opponent's taking a long time to think about things. You got to think about how you're going to be responding to things to not give away information.
Looks like another Riftbolt may have been the draw. Maybe it was an Eidolon actually. Interesting. In for 1. 2. Riftbolt. Thank you, Burnmaster.
I count all the points.
Yes, you do.
I love them all.
Well, then you must love playing against this Death Shadow tech.
I mean, it's high stress.
They do half the work for you. Maybe even more than that. Rodriguez with an Eidolon. Gonna leave that white mana up.
And an Eidolon here, backed up by Path to Exile to answer a Death Shadow, is about as rolled up as you can get from Rodriguez's perspective.
It's a pretty tough spot here for Nelson. Six. Pass it back.
I like Rodriguez here, not pathing end of turn, try to get one more prowess trigger out.
That's what he's going to do. Death Shadow, you're going to have to leave. Brad. He's got a basic in his board.
Oh, sure.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, you can bring in the forest. That's good. Certainly good given how tight his mana situation is.
Swift Spear's a 2-3 right now.
Well, you should be attacking here. The only reason not to is mutagenic growth, but mutagenic growth is 4 points.
Yeah, it just kills him.
And it doesn't kill any of the, one of the creatures gets through.
Yep.
So you gotta send them both here.
Yeah, it looks like Miles doesn't realize that.
Yeah, the only reason not to attack it is mutagenic growth, and
Mutagenic Growth leaves Brad on board.
yeah, it's just dead on board.
Yeah. 2 left to play it, 2 from the Eidolon. Brings Nelson down to 2. One of the 2 power creatures gets through.
Right.
That's it. There's a block. That's it. I don't know if Nelson has outs. Maybe he does. Suspending Riftbolt makes it so that it's getting more difficult.
Right, he takes 2 casting anything.
Yep.
And he needs to get blockers and et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, well, this is interesting.
He can cast the Pyroclasm.
Yeah. Boys, he's going to have to get lucky to win this game. Whew.
But then if he casts the Pyroclasm and takes the Ripple, he's done playing lands.
True.
And Rodriguez, I'll say, is drawing live.
Would you say that? He's drawing. He has a few outs.
But we are not done.
Nelson's at 1. The draw. A Grim Lavamancer.
All right. Okay. I guess we're still playing.
We are still playing Magic. Nelson will draw. Are we still playing Magic, Brad?
He's got to make do with just a Blood Crypt and a Forest, and needs to be able to win the game quickly and kill every play that Rodriguez makes for the rest of the game. Asking too much.
Asking a little too much.
Little too much.
Little too much. Miles Rodriguez is going to win game number 3 here over Brad Nelson. Burn and Death Shadow Aggro going to get ready here for game number 4. So we saw Nelson bring in the Forest. He's brought in the Pyroclasm as well. Do you expect to see anything else here now that he's going back to the drawing board? You saw him pull a sideboard out of his deck box.
I don't know. I mean, there is an argument for some play-draw swapping. Maybe on the draw he's a little bit more interested in doing the Hooting Mandrill sort of thing. My perspective, Brad can speak to this. I'm sure we're going to have an opportunity to talk to him. And maybe he disagrees with me. My perspective on the matchup is Brad's best shot of winning is to be as full throttle as possible. That involves Become Immense, Teamer Battle Rage, etc. And I'm not looking for things like Hooting Mandrills and maybe not even Tarmogoyf.
Okay. Keep it low to the ground.
Yes.
Just do what you were doing in the first game.
Be your game 1 deck, more or less. I think the Inquisitions are fine to bring in. The Forest is an okay response to the Path to Exile. Maybe the Tarmogoyf's just efficient enough that it's worth bringing in as well, but I'm not looking to go too crazy here.
Well, on Miles' side, I don't think a lot changes. I think the Deflecting Palm is going to stay. I think that Path to Exile is going to stay. And then maybe he has Lightning Helix, maybe he doesn't, but I don't think he needs to change his deck very much.
I don't think so either. I think he needs to focus on being as much of a 1-mana spell deck as possible. The place where Nelson gets his edge in the matchup, he is just much more efficient with his ability to deploy cards fast. Rodriguez has gotten bottlenecked a little bit with the 2-mana cards at times, and the more that he can get away from that, and the more that he can be about 1-mana spells, I think that'll serve him very well.
Well, we're going to shuffle up, get ready here for game number 3. We're going to talk about the StarCityGames.com YouTube page, which now has over 100,000 subscribers.
Congratulations to everyone involved with the YouTube page, and thank you everyone out there for subscribing. You can subscribe right now at youtube.com/StarCityGames. A lot of content up there, including Versus Series videos, Commander Versus videos, Magic Online playtesting, Best of SCG Live, and much more. Get a head start here at being part of the 200,000 subscriber contest and giveaway here over at youtube.com/StarCityGames. Get notified when new content is uploaded to the page.
We will be doing our giveaway, and our details about the giveaway soon enough will be filmed with our awesome Commander Versus players. That's Jeremy Knowles, Stephen Green, Justin Parnell, and Wes Wise. So I want to thank everyone for all their support at StarCityGames.com YouTube page. Over 100,000 subscribers. Couldn't do it without you, and you'll be able to watch the replays of this match and this tournament a little bit later this week. But we turn our attention to game number 4 here between Brad Nelson and Miles Rodriguez, and Nelson has kept relatively quickly. We'll see if Rodriguez is happy to keep. Remember, last game, Rodriguez did mulligan to 6.
Yep.
Good enough.
Well, when the games end as fast as they do, it is more about, do you have the right stuff? Even from the burn side, which is usually a deck where you need a critical mass of stuff, and mulligans are really painful, and you keep sketchy 7-card hands all the time. Brad is doing so much of the work for Miles here that Miles should be on the hunt for high-impact cards. He should not be keeping 4 lands and 3 lava spikes. That's not good here.
So you feel like he can mulligan pretty freely?
Yeah, and it's not free, and he still needs to be wary of going down too far, and going to 5 is going to be painful. But hands with Path to Exile, Deflecting Palm, or just creatures and interaction, they're so good here that it's worth throwing away sketchy 7-card hands. In contrast to a matchup like Jund, where they have a bunch of Inquisitions and Lilianas, and you just kind of need every card you can get your hands on.
Well, Nelson, he's no stranger to the feature match area. We know that. He always makes himself very comfortable there.
Yes.
The cameras don't bother him. He's been on them so many times. For Miles Rodriguez, he's a newcomer, but I think he's carried himself very well.
Yep.
I think he's played a very good match so far.
I was not thrilled with the no attack with the Eidolon last game, and hypothetically that could have come back to burn him.
Very true.
But fortunately for him, he was ahead by such a margin that as long as he just didn't draw lands for the remainder of the game, he was going to get it done.
It would have been a long shot, but it's possible.
Well,
that's the point.
If Brad goes let's say Rodriguez draws a land instead of a Grim Lavamancer, and Brad goes untap Death Shadow, and Rodriguez misses again.
Uh-oh.
That could be game.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that far away from Brad getting it flipped. He needed basically 2 dead draw steps, but Rodriguez found something the first time around, and that was good enough to get it done.
Hey, and that's what kind of makes Modern great, right? The games can flip real fast.
Yes.
And you have to make a lot of decisions in a small amount of time. The game begins on the first turn of the game, which is a weird thing to say, but everything starts real fast in Modern. Mm-hmm. From the first land that you play to the first play that you make on the first turn of the game. Rodriguez is going to keep. Give that top card a peek. Keep it on top. Here we go. The bobble. Nelson wants to take a look at his top card.
Could be a fetch land or no opening here. Wants to get the goods first. Like to know, Gataxian Probe like to know too. Scoping out action.
Stomping Ground tapped past that turn back. Let's go over to Miles Rodriguez. Picked up a copy of Arid Mesa.
Yeah, and his hand looks pretty sweet here. 2 lands, Swift Spear, Lavamancer, Eidolon.
The Palm.
The Palm. Another nice thing about the way that Rodriguez is set up here post-board, if he gets away from the Atarka's commands, he doesn't really have to fetch for green mana. His relevant sideboard cards are Deflecting Palm and Path to Exile. So he can pump the brakes a little bit on having to take a lot of fetch land damage, because if he wants to, he can get away from needing Stomping Ground entirely.
There's Monastery Swift Spear. Beatdowns for 1. Nelson, only 19. Only 19. See how low he wants to go this turn. There's also this really weird dynamic that Brad and this deck can play a zoo game, or they can play a Death Shadow game, depending on how the cards have lined up.
I just don't think the zoo game is good enough most of the time because of all the damage Brad is dealing to himself. I've had a lot of experience in the zoo on burn matchup from both sides, and even when I was playing with Lightning Helixes and not dealing that much damage to myself, it was still challenging. Brad's deck is even more extreme in that regard. Like I said, I think he's best served as a turn 3 combo deck. That should be the driving plan here.
There's a Swift Spear. Here, maybe, yes, come the attacks. Just 1. Rodriguez going to fall down to 16. Nelson has the lead. Haven't said that much. Sacred Foundry, the draw. Nick Miller, a observer here of this match. It's been a fun one to watch so far.
Yes.
Games have not been long, but they have been long.
I mean, we're approaching 50 minutes here.
We are.
In game number 4.
We can tell you about other match as well. Lucas Loizen, who is playing Jeskai Nahiri. He's up 2-1 over JD Klumperens, who is playing Jund. Well, some have picked Lucas to win this tournament.
I was one of them.
Yeah.
But a lot rides on this matchup because I think the Jeskai matchup against Burn is perhaps Jeskai's best matchup in the format. I have lost to that deck countless times.
Yep.
I think the Death Shadow deck is a lot harder.
I do too.
A lot harder. And if Brad is able to get through this matchup, it really shakes up, I think, what the rest of the bracket is going to look like. Because my prediction was predicated on Rodriguez getting this match.
Well, they oftentimes say that winning the final game is the hardest one to win. And this might be the toughest one here.
And with our head judge there in the background, I would not be surprised if both players here were getting prompted to play a little bit faster.
Yeah.
It's been tough so far. I think both Nelson and Rodriguez have maintained a reasonable pace of play. But untimed rounds is no excuse.
Indeed.
You still have to keep a pace of play going.
Lavamancer, suspended Rift Bolt after the attack with the Swift Spear past the turn back. Seems like a big opening here for Nelson.
Yep. Especially if he has drawn his 1 sideboarded copy of Pyroclasm again, this would be an excellent spot.
Absolutely, it would be. Nelson will get the... Nope. Just kidding. Does he want the Goblet Shrine? Okay, he does. To Brad Nelson for his 3rd turn of game number 4. Does he have the power? Oh, hello. You said Pyroclasm would be good.
Yep.
The prowess trigger on Monastery Swift Spear means it's real good. And now there goes Rodriguez's board. He's going to send the Rift Bolt. Which way? Ooh, Nelson wants to keep the Swift Spear. How do you feel about this?
Seems fine to me. I mean, he needs to get some clock going. I don't know what else the mutagenic growth is doing in this spot.
Rodriguez has drawn a Rift Bolt. He'll play a Scalding Tarn. And now he's going to play an Eidolon. Now, talking to Nelson a little bit earlier today, he said he's not too afraid of that card.
Eidolon's going to have spots of being very good, but it is predicated on Rodriguez being on the front foot. And as we've seen, it's kind of hard. We think of Burn as being one of the more aggressive, more explosive decks in the format. Rodriguez has felt behind in the first 2 turns of the game most of the time. And you need to be at least a neutral spot usually for Eidolon to be good.
You can see Nelson's hand. It's a nice one. He's got Become Immense, Teamer Battle Rage, Death Shadow, I believe a Lightning Bolt, and a Mutagenic Growth. I think what he's just missing is land number 3. Here is Death Shadow. Oh, this is really smart. So what he's doing is he's playing Death Shadow at 15 life, trigger from Eidolon, go down to 13, trigger before Death Shadow resolves, respond to his own Death Shadow, cast Lightning Bolt on the Eidolon. He's going to take more damage so that when Death Shadow resolves, he's underneath the 13.
Yep.
He's at 11. And it's so nice of Brad to point out those Eidolon triggers instead of hoping that Miles forgets them.
Nope. No.
You can't forget. I'm taking 2. I swear I'm taking 2. And now Rodriguez down to 9. Now we know that Rodriguez does have Deflecting Palm in hand.
And now we're going to see how does Brad try to work his way through that card.
Now, of course, both players have access to each other's sideboard coming into the elimination round. So Brad knows that he has Deflecting Palm in his deck. If this was a match during the Swiss, day 1 or day 2, he might get caught off guard.
Yep.
But he knows front and center you have 3 copies of that card in your sideboard.
And 3 that's just a lot of copies of the card.
Yeah, it is.
I was talking to you before. That's at least 2 too many for my taste in the board, but not a bad matchup to have access to 3.
It's a Rift Bolt on Suspend. And even though Miles is doing a little body language there, you may have caught of the, all right, that's it, go ahead. I don't really have much going on over here. Yep.
Nope. Nelson not buying that.
Doesn't work on that guy. Doesn't work on this guy we're watching right now.
You might have killed someone in F&M doing that, but this is a little different. And Brad's life total, oddly enough, is kind of high enough that he can sort of just do the chip shot game. He doesn't need to go full throttle this turn.
It's not a lethal Deflecting Palm.
No.
You know, it's a weird Deflecting Palm, but it's not a lethal one.
The problem is that it can get to the point where it is lethal because this Rift Bolt will knock Brad down to 8, and doesn't take much more of that kind of sequence for it to just kill him.
Yep.
But the upshot of it is, if he's getting Rift Bolted, it may get Rodriguez closer and closer to the point where he just has to play it straight up. He just needs a Deflecting Palm to keep himself alive. And then Brad might be able to go over the top with Become Immense on other creatures.
Sure.
So I like the slow burn here that Nelson's doing a little bit.
Mutagenic Growth. Nelson going to fall down to 9. So this is +4/+4. And now, ooh, hello.
All right, well. So I think he is covered here against the Deflecting Palm, because remember, Double Strike is part of this.
The next time a source of your choice would deal damage to you this turn, prevent that damage. If damage is prevented this way, Deflecting Palm deals that much damage to that source's controller.
So we're looking at 3 points of damage right now from the Swift Spear.
Correct.
So Rodriguez goes to 6, and this Death Shadow is attacking for... Yeah, I don't think Deflecting Palm gets him out of this.
Attacks for 6, the Death Shadow, correct?
Right.
13 minus 9 is 4, +2 from Mutagenic Growth, so it's 6. So it'd be 12 in reality because of Double Strike.
Right.
So the first hit for 6, no good from Deflecting Palm. Okay?
Yep.
And Brad knows that. He says, okay, I will take 6 to the face, which means that my Death Shadow is enormous. And I believe then Rodriguez dies from the actual damage.
Right.
That's what happens there. So Overturf brought that up during the pregame show about, yeah, you can get hit once, but actually when it hits you in the face, assuming it works this weird way that it does, that means we're going to game 5.
So the other way for Rodriguez to handle it, I'm not sure. There was no way for him to stop being killed by Deflecting Palm there, so it's whatever. what you want to do is you take the first strike hit and then you deflecting palm the regular damage hit. Because if you do it the other way, then Brad takes a bunch of damage, and then the Death Shadow hit the second time around is even greater.
Yeah.
You want to take the first strike hit and then deflecting palm the second thing, so you're not growing the Death Shadow and then also taking the hit.
Sure. That's weird.
Yes.
It's true.
Right. Yeah. It's again, a lot of funky interactions in this matchup.
Yeah. To be sure, Nelson going to take a step away from the table to get ready for game number 5. One of the things that, if you ever watched Brad play in the feature match area in high leverage situations like this, he's a man who likes to control the feature match area. He's going to step away if he needs to take a minute to recompose himself, use the restroom, what have you. And we don't mind it. We can just come back to the booth. We can talk to you.
Right, it's fine.
As Brad does get ready here for game number 5, so that's exactly what we're going to do. Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan, we are here in the booth bringing you the quarterfinals of the New Jersey Invitational here, hosted by StarCityGames.com, the conclusion of the SCG Tour, of course, presented by the awesome people at Ultimate Guard. This one has been as much fun to watch as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, this has been great so far. I think Nelson has played a great match up until this point.
Me too.
Rodriguez's lines, I think for the most part, it's pretty straightforward stuff. I have liked most of his judgment calls in a macro sense. Some of the nuances of what's been going on the table I've disagreed with. This should be a great game 5.
Yeah, I know there's all the cards are on the table. We know what both players are going to do. Both players know what they're going to do, but the draws range so much from what can happen in a game. And that game, for example, Brad just played a tapped Stomping Ground to start. Mishra's bobbles himself, gets a little bit of information. All right, how do I want to proceed forward? Swift Spear, little attack. And none of the probe myself, street wraith myself, crack, fetch land, blah. None of that game. So he can play a couple different games here. At the end of the day, I think it still revolves around Death Shadow.
Yes.
He needs that card to win, but that was a different kind of kickoff to a game that we've seen so far.
And, I think what's very interesting to me for this matchup, and particularly from Rodriguez's side of the table where I've been numerous times, is the opening hand that he draws up informs so much of how he wants to go about playing the game. Because if he draws up an opening hand, let's say with no Path to Exile, no Deflecting Palm, he might have to say, I'm going to try to kill on turn 3.5. I can't hold on to this game forever. If Nelson has Death Shadow, and we've seen it several times where Rodriguez has been trying to thread the needle, trying to straddle the line of applying lethal over 2 turns without getting killed by Death Shadow. It's really hard to do because Nelson's deck plays so well at 0 mana and 1 mana, and Rodriguez's responses are typically 1 mana and 2 mana. So when the stack builds up, when it's about who can do the burstiest turn, Nelson's going to win that battle more often than not.
Yeah, and it's going to cost him life to win that battle. In
right.
most instances with mutagenic growth and cycling Street Wraith, as we saw in one of the earlier games, but I do think that he can do more unique things in situations like that. So, this last game that we're going to watch is going to come down to Path to Exile, is going to come down to Deflecting Palm, because one of the things that Miles is doing here, by bringing in those cards, he's being a bit more reactive. He isn't his pedal to the metal, so you talk about trying to win on turn 3.5, maybe if his hand kind of shakes out that way, he might draw a Path or a Deflecting Palm within those exchanges, and then that might be a little poor and maybe upset the balance of what he's trying to do.
Right. Well, I think the ideal scenario is he is able to play the defense game. Okay. To the extent that Burn can play the defense game.
Yeah.
He wants to give himself, as long as he's not dying on turn 3 or at risk of dying on turn 3, the top of his deck is going to kill Brad so often once you get beyond that point. So if he can hold tight for the first 3 turns of the game, the rest of it's going to take care of itself. And that to me is kind of the story of game 3, which Rodriguez won. Was he was able to fend off death for a while. He wasn't at risk of getting pumped out and killed in 1 turn. And Brad's deck just doesn't operate in the long term very well in that sort of game because he deals so much damage to himself and Rodriguez is drawing so live. So as long as he can defend himself from those turn 3 kills, it shouldn't be that hard for him to take the match. The Path to Exiles, the Deflecting Palms, that's his best route to defend himself, but if he doesn't have them, then he's just going to have to be a beatdown deck and hope that's good enough.
Well, we're going to find out if it's good enough right now. Brad Nelson is back in the feature match area, so let's head back down there. Nelson Rodriguez, game 5. Now let me ask you this. Nelson on the draw here. For game 5. He was number 3 overall, so he had to play in the matchup, so ideally he gets to play games, 1, 3, and 5, something like that. He's on the draw. How much of a difference do you think that makes?
It's a big difference. The saving grace here is Rodriguez's sideboard is much more about cards that are good on the draw than cards that are good on the play. So when your opponent's bringing in a bunch of Deflecting Palms and Path to Exiles, it's harder to make use of those cards on the play sometimes. That said, it's still a game that's a matchup where the game's going to be over on turn 3 or turn 4 most of the time, and being on the play is a huge deal. Like, it just means you will likely have 1 extra turn. And we've seen people, I suspect all 4 games, if we went back and watch, the losing player has died with spells in their hands. It's not like we got everything out and someone won.
Yeah.
It's someone got killed before they could leverage all their resources.
The games are razor thin, and I even think about the first game. assuming we had the good look at Brad's hand where he didn't cast the mutagenic growth in the Wild Coddle, the Rift Bolt resolved, and then Miles was able to attack for Xaxes, where Miles, he drew a lot of lands that game, but that game ended on turn 3.
Yes.
So there'll be some games to replay here, that's for sure. It's a weird matchup. You would think, just looking deckless to deckless, that Burn is a heavy favorite, and I do think that Burn is favored here, but it doesn't mean that Death Shadow can't win.
And this is where all the work that Nelson did, testing this matchup and testing this deck, pays off. Because I think that if you put me down there and had me play against Rodriguez with the draws that Nelson's had, I think this match would probably be over. I think I would have lost 3-1, most likely. And Brad has an opportunity to take the whole thing.
Yeah. So much complexity. Now, Nelson said coming in, I think I had a pretty sharp read on the metagame for Modern, but the thing I did not want to play against was Burn. His thought process was the Burn players were just going to get kind of knocked out a little bit early. He was hoping not to get paired against one, and he felt that if we made it to the top 8, he wouldn't have to play against Burn.
Right.
Well, here we are. He's got to try to overcome this, and I know that he feels that if he's able to get past this, win this next game, if he plays against Jeskai or he plays against Jun next round, he doesn't mind.
Yeah, I mean, those are decks that are trying to do things for 4 mana, and
Yeah.
Brad's doing a lot of stuff for 0.
Exactly. He said, I can beat those decks, and he thinks he can beat the other side of the bracket as well. He's got to get by this game, this player here, Miles Rodriguez, to keep those PCQ dreams alive, as he so eloquently put it earlier this weekend. We'll see if Miles Rodriguez can play spoiler here. Again, I think he's played a pretty solid match thus far. New to the bright lights, unlike Brad Nelson, but I think he's carried himself very well.
Yeah, they suspend Rift Bolt on turn 1, I believe, of game number 2 over Swift Spear and Lightning Bolt did show a very nuanced understanding of the matchup. He still got killed on the 3rd turn and died with 4 spells in his hand or whatever. But in a macro sense, what are the lines? What's my positioning in the matchup? How do I go about winning the game? I think Rodriguez has been very solid. I've agreed on a macro level with most of his decision making. There's been some nuance, like I've said before, on the battlefield that I don't think has been great, but on the balance, I think he's played a very solid matchup. Brad, though, has been lights out so far.
He's been Brad.
Other than
that mutagenic growth.
Yeah, and who knows? I mean, I'm sure if we go back and talk to Brad, he was saying, I probably wasn't playing around Lava Spike. I assumed I would have gotten spiked last turn. He needs to have 7 points of damage that could only target players for me to lose by not mutagenic growthing, and he had Boros Charm, Lava Spike.
Yep. Crazy game 1.
Yeah, but I think it's going to be hard for Nelson to bat 1,000 in this matchup on decision making, because so much of it is developing confidence intervals around the likely range of Rodriguez's hand, and he's got to make some risky plays at certain points. Sometimes they're going to look bad in retrospect, but I'm pretty sure Nelson went in the tank on that mutagenic growth play for quite a while.
Lucas Loyson, JD Clum parents, number 2 and number 7 are all seed. That's Jeskai and Ahiri against Jund. They're going to game 5. I think we might have a lot of matches go to game 5.
Yep. I'm excited for Hawkins majors in that respect. I see that one going the full 5.
Talked to Eric a little bit earlier today. He said, pre-board, I got to get them both.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
He knows.
Yep.
He knows.
He said, pre-board, I got to get them both. Post-board, I got to steal one.
But I think he's a heavy favorite in the pre-board games. Maybe heavy's strong.
Heavy's strong, but I think he's a favorite.
I think he's a favorite.
That, of course, is Affinity in the hands of Eric Hawkins, number 1 overall seed against Michael Majors playing Abzan. But his Abzan deck is not geared towards beating Affinity in game 1.
Not to get too far ahead of ourselves, I would not be surprised if that matchup came down to game 2. Can Hawkins win a pre-boarded game on the draw and get up 2-0, and then maybe steal one of the post-board games where he's going to be on the play twice?
Nelson taking a long look, which I would expect him to do because those hands are weird.
That said, if Majors wins game 1
Yikes.
on the draw, yeah, I think he becomes a substantial favorite to take the whole match.
Is he trying to convince himself to keep or convince himself to mulligan?
Well, a hand like this might be dense with Gataxian Probe, Mishra's Bauble, Street Raid type of like redraws. What does some uncertainty on the hand? I'd be really surprised if this was just 7 lands and spells that just do things that Brad had to debate this long about.
Well, he's going to keep. Rodriguez on the play. Let's play game number 5, shall we? Scalding Tarn here from Miles. He'll search up a basic mountain. Let's see how he wants to kick things off. Haven't seen a Goblin Guide yet.
Have not. I love this matchup. I mean, it's just so high tension with both players trying to, like, stave off, burst you down in one turn.
Yep.
And it's happening on both sides of the table.
It's Suspend Rift Bolt.
All right.
to Nelson. Windswept Heath the draw. I don't know if that's good or bad. Did he keep a land heavy hand? Did he keep a land light hand?
And if Rodriguez's play here is turn 1 suspend Rift Bolt, I think, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here. I think his plan is he's ignoring creatures and going straight at Nelson's life total if he kept this 7.
Nelson has Step Links in hand. Looks like maybe 2 copies of it.
And I think Nelson is probably going to be too slow on the draw against a Lava Spike style draw unless he has Death Shadow. Hard to race with the amount of damage that Nelson deals to himself.
I think his hand is land heavy. All right, Windswept Heath pass, 17. There's only one way for that Rift Bolt to go.
Just 2.
Stop. Just stop.
You said it. I mean, just clarifying. I'm the expert in the booth or whatever.
A Rift Bolt on suspend here from Miles yet again. He played a Sacred Foundry tapped. He's going to pass turn back over to Nelson. He'll crack a fetch land. Will Brad. He's going to fall down to 16. Got to figure out what land he wants to get, so he's going to consult his hand yet again. We've seen Godless Shrine quite a bit, and it'll be Godless Shrine yet again. Black and white mana online. To Nelson. Has Lightning Bolt in hand. At least 1 Mutagenic Growth in hand. We mentioned Step Links earlier. It's Step Links now. Follow up. I think he has to play a land. Yeah, it's going to be a stomping around tap. Pass the turn back. All right, Rift Bolt, where are you going?
I'm going upstairs. Yeah. Top rope. Yeah. Yeah.
Another land here. Ooh. There are 3 more lands in hand right now for Miles Rodriguez.
I think he's got a spike and a bolt.
He does. Spike's going upstairs. Nelson down to 10. I think he's going to hold that Lightning Bolt. Going to try to represent some strength right now.
Yep.
To Nelson. Hey, you think about it, realistically, both players have had dynamic hands in all the 4 games we've watched. Now they're kind of hobbling along.
Yeah, this is definitely the least explosive from both sides of the table we've seen so far.
What do we have here? Oh, Kitty Cat. Tarmogoyf.
Whoa! It's like a normal game of Magic almost.
We'll have to get out the old Tarmogoyf die, figure out how big that thing is. I'm thinking 3-4. Maybe 2-3. I think only 2-3 land sorcery. That is it. Rodriguez is going to sacrifice a land here. Going to fall down to 16. Remember, Lightning Bolt in hand. Nelson's giving him a lot of time. However, every creature that Rodriguez draws now is really bad.
Yes.
So creatures almost feel like that draws. He's already drawn a lot of lands. Lands are already pretty poor draws, so it's got to be burn spells, right?
Yep. And I think Nelson does have a Lightning Bolt in hand.
He does.
So that's something. But his clock is not that fast right now. That said, Nelson's got to, Rodriguez rather has to come up with 7 points from somewhere.
He does. Let's see what the draw is. Nope. I think he found another land. Yes, he did. Pass the turn back. It's a bad time for Flood. Nelson, in a way, kind of wants to Flood. Got 2 Step Links out there. Take a draw step. Become immense. So here's where things start to get a little tricky, right? You know your opponent has Path and Deflecting Palm after sideboard. Can you ever make a move?
Well, I mean, Rodriguez is pretty clearly flooding out because he would have killed you if he could.
Flooding out, but is he flooding out with, does he have just reactive cards in his hand right now? Does he have Path and Palm?
Sure. I mean, at this point, I think Brad can err on the side of caution a little bit.
Okay.
Because Rodriguez is not threatening to kill him in the short term with Brad at 10 and Rodriguez not really doing anything. He can just do all right, attack you for 4 this turn. Next turn, maybe crack my Verdant Catacomb, go get a land, attack you for 4 again. He can do the same thing that we saw in Game 4 where he can push and eventually play over the top.
You saw Fetch Land come down in Verdant Catacomb. So right now this is an attack for 6 with the potential for 10 if Brad wants to sacrifice the Fetch Land. But a lot of things got to run through your mind right now. He's not going to see his opponent's hand or top card of the deck with either Gataxian Probe or Mishra's Bauble. So you don't really know what Miles is working with. You can assume Flood,
Yep.
Sure, he's played 4 lands.
Very easily could be Deflecting Palm or Path to Exile. Those cards definitely should be on Nelson's mind.
Yeah, ugh. You can see Brad, he kind of rocked back in his chair a little bit. Am I supposed to go? You could certainly reason with yourself, right, that Miles has kept a hand with Deflecting Palm.
Yep.
You know he's got 3 after sideboard. It just makes sense that he would keep a hand with that card.
In fact, Nelson could go for the kill right now. He has Become Immense in hand and a Lightning Bolt. He can just push. I mean, it's super risky.
Because he could just die.
Yeah, because he's got 6 on the table right now. This fetch land is now 4 more points. So that's 10.
He's going to sacrifice that Blood Crypt, that Verdant Catacombs to get a Blood Crypt, which means triggers here for the Step Links. So right now, 2 4/5s and a 2/3 attacking. The more time you give him, though, the riskier it gets.
And this is a reasonable way to go about doing it here. I guess now we're Brad falling to 9.
Bolt puts him to 6.
Yeah,
Mutagenic growth over there.
I think Brad would like to sort of try to split the difference a little bit here of make an attack that's good enough to induce a Deflecting Palm, where maybe you can kill over the top if he does it, or you don't die if Rodriguez does it. Does that line exist?
Taking a look at the Mutagenic growth in Brad's hand. Do you pay 2 life?
Yeah.
Or do you pay a green mana?
Because this is the problem. He has 3 attackers this turn. Next turn, he may go down to 1 attacker because the Step Links just won't have any power.
Yep.
And then it's much worse if you're trying to play around Path to Exile and Deflecting Palm when you're only attacking with 1 creature versus attacking with 3. So this might be a decent window now for Brad to get at least some of the pump spells out of his hand if he thinks the risk-reward calculus breaks the right way.
Head judge Nick Saban, you saw him slide in and said, need you to make a play.
This match might be done after the Jeskai versus John matchup. We played, I don't even...
25 turns?
Yeah, roughly 25 turns, 30 turns.
Yep.
These are hard games, though.
Oh, boy.
And again, this matchup is both players hold, 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 burst.
He's back. You need to make a play.
This is this game, the match. Brad's hope to get to the Players' Championship. It's all here.
All right, Mutagenic growth.
We know Brad's relatively safe. Rodriguez is only on Lightning Bolt, but Brad certainly does not know that.
On Tarmogoyf. Remember, this will be +3. Instant in the graveyard, +2/+2. So that makes Tarmogoyf into a 5. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. That'd be 13 points of damage if it all comes through.
Yeah.
Rodriguez is going to fall down to 3. Nelson's going to pass the turn back.
And now Brad has a lethal attacker and the ability to kill at instant speed next turn.
Nelson's going to fall down to 6. Nelson's going to say Lightning Bolt, you going to show the hand, and that is going to do it. Brad Nelson is going to win this match here over Miles Rodriguez. 3 games to 2. Death Shadow Aggro is going to take down Burn. What a match.
That was great.
What a match.
It was dense. Dense in decisions.
Unbelievable.
No wasted turns. We did not have to cover a single turn that didn't matter.